What's going on, guys? So this is part 2, vlog style, actually more like a podcast style video, where we are going to talk about my brother's struggles following Hurricane Michael, what year was Hurricane Michael?
It was October 10th, 2018.
So October 10th, 2018, Panama City, Florida, and Tyndall Air Force Base is probably the best way for a lot of people to probably recognize it, because it barreled directly through Tyndall Air Force Base, destroyed it, leveled it, flattened it. Watch the first video where we talk more about that. And then it moved directly into Panama City, spawning, if you don't know this, so you get hurricanes, which are these massive storms that are huge, just absolutely enormous, and they spawn hundreds of tornadoes. So a lot of people think, well, I'd rather go through a hurricane than a tornado. But what you don't realize is if you have a hurricane, you're going to have hundreds of tornadoes that spawn off inside of that hurricane, trailing it on the leading edge. It's scary. And if you haven't been through a major hurricane before, then it's hard to even describe it, because almost anybody in Florida has probably been through a minor hurricane. Category 1, a lot of tropical storms. Category 2, I think the largest one I was there for was Hurricane Ivan. Mm-hmm. And Ivan was a pretty terrible hurricane.
I believe it was a Cat 3.
I think it was a Cat 3. Mm-hmm. And Hurricane Michael originally was classified as a Category 4, but when they found the sensors at Tyndall Air Force Base, they recategorized it as a Category 5 because of the damage. And that's typically how it's based, on the wind speeds and the damage and destruction.
So after the storm had passed and, we talked to the neighbors, we realized everybody was okay. Nobody was hurt. It's just a lot of damage, but most importantly, everybody was okay. And that was the most important thing. At that point, we realized that our house is not livable. We can't stay here. This is going to be a mold-infested problem. And so I called my brother and said, I think I need to buy an RV, because at that time I had all the thoughts going through my head of, do I need to go find a hotel room immediately, or can I get this RV? And the deciding point for me was I need to be able to work on my house and not leave the house open to looters. I want to be able to work on the house and go out to the RV and take a shower and go to bed and wake up and go right back to work on the house again. And so I decided that we're going to buy a camper. And I had the Toyota Tundra. I didn't have any kind of a fifth wheel attachment. I couldn't feasibly do the fifth wheel. Even though the space would have been great, I needed a bumper pull. And that's when the research started on floor plans. The first place I reached out to was our local RV dealership, Camping World, I believe is the name of it. And they had a decent inventory. A lot of people were doing the same thing as me. They were buying RVs. So when you're walking through their lot to see what's available, a lot of them already said sold. And so they had some bigger ones that I didn't think, hey, I have a Tundra. We're going to go camping after all of this is over. So I want something that's not going to be too big, because I didn't want to have, and this is an expression I learned from my brother, I didn't want to have the tail wagging the dog. I didn't want something that was, oh, this truck can tow 11,000 pounds. Let's get something that's 11,000 pounds. I didn't want to do that. I wanted to have something that I could tow without white knuckle driving the whole way and worrying about the extra weight. So they didn't have anything at Camping World that we were really interested in. I mean, I almost decided to buy something from them just because they were close and convenient. And when I talked to the salesman, we started talking about numbers, and we started talking about delivery and whatnot. And they wanted $1,000 to deliver a camper. It didn't matter which one. They wanted a $1,000 delivery fee to bring this thing about, 10 miles from my house. So they wanted $1,000 to drive it 10 miles and deliver it to my front door. I thought that was a little bit crazy. I called around, and most of the RV dealerships within 50 to 100 miles were just getting hammered. People were just buying everything they could, so inventory wasn't very selective. And at the time I had a 5-year-old daughter, She was 5, now she's 10. But she was 5, and we wanted to give her a good space to play, to read, to feel comfortable. And so what we focused on primarily was the living space, the living room. And the one that caught my eye was a Sportsman 24 LE, I think it was. I think that LE stood for some kind of living room arrangement. But it was a what's the term? I guess it's called a rear living room.
Rear living room floor plan, yep.
So it's a rear living room floor plan. And what I liked about it was when you walked in, you had the entertainment center, which faced towards the back of the RV, and the back of the RV had a nice couch. And also the dining area to the left of the couch, everything could view the TV very easily. So I knew that we could, at the end of the day, even if I'm still working on the house, my wife and daughter could sit down and watch a movie, watch TV. She could still read her book. She could play with her Legos and be in a comfortable space, because there was no kid's bedroom. That was her bedroom and our living room. She slept on the jackknife sofa. We slept in the bedroom. And at the time, my daughter was young enough to not let the storm imprint upon her in a bad way. She didn't know what was going on. She didn't even cry. When we were in the bathroom and I'm up against the door, she wasn't even crying. She was just sitting there with just a normal expression on her face because she didn't know what was going on. And I'm so thankful for that, because if she would have been a little bit older, I can imagine it would have left some scars, some emotional scars.
Oh, yeah.
Some horrible memories. So I wanted her to have a comfortable living space. And the Sportsman LE for us was, it looked like it would fit the bill. And once we had it delivered, and once we lived in it for 7.5 months, looking back, we should have got something a little bit bigger, something more like a 32, 34, 35 footer. But I had intentions of going camping, and, that kind of played into the whole decision-making process. I wanted something that was practical. And, my family, we're used to making the best out of the space that we're given. We like to be outside more than inside. So the way we looked at it is, this camper, we didn't know how long we were going to be living in it, but we knew that it was going to be better than living in the mold-infested house.
Safer. Yeah.
So by far, it was a godsend. We called, and I found a dealership up in, I think it was Mississippi. Dad's Camper Outlet was what it was called. And I called, I got a hold of a salesman, and we had a deal within an hour. And they delivered it from Mississippi to my front door, or my driveway, for $500, compared to Campers World, which was just a few miles down the road, wanted double. So they showed up within the time frame that they had promised. We did the inspection. It was pretty late. We did it all at night, had the flashlights out. The delivery guy was really nice. No issues with anything. And we were able to get it hooked up to the sewage. I was lucky because our clean out port was right next to where he parked the RV.
Oh, that's awesome.
It was awesome because a lot of my neighbors had a different situation where theirs was very far from their RV, and they were having to work on doing some kind of having the hose up higher in certain places with such a long run. It was difficult. They had a lot of issues where they had clogs.
Yeah, backed up issues, right?
And if you know about RVs and cleaning out the tanks, it's not fun if that stuff gets on you or gets anywhere that it's not supposed to be. And so I was asked by a couple of neighbors to help remediate their sewage issues, and I reluctantly did, because I know that that's
the neighborly thing.
That's not fun to deal with at all. And I had my system working perfectly, and so I just I wanted to help. I wanted after the storm, everybody's trying to help each other as much as possible. So,
and you had a 30 amp connection hooked up to the side of your house too, right?
I did. I have a 30 amp connection because one of my good friends owns an electrical company. John came over and installed the 30 amp outlet on the side of our house, and luckily we had in our breaker box outside, we had one unused breaker in there, so he was able to run a 30 amp leg off of that to the outlet, which was great.
Yeah, no,
because
that's
before
awesome.
that we were using an extension cord with an adapter.
So essentially, you had full hookups, which is really nice.
Yes, yeah, had full hookups, sewage, power. It was nice. We had a pretty decent setup, and of course, we had a nice little patio area right outside of the camper, which is where we spent a lot of the time. The weather was, we were very fortunate because after the storm, it was in October, so the weather was pleasant. If the storm would have hit us in, earlier in the summer, like August, September, it would have been a swamp, especially with no electricity. But the weather was pleasant, and that's one of the silver linings after the storm. I was able to work on the house, and get a lot done comfortably. I think typically after most hurricanes go through an area, because they suck all the moisture out with it as they go, it leaves a nice dry climate for, for the after effects.
So a couple questions for you, and these are things I kind of know the answers to, but I haven't specifically asked. So you bought your RV, you went RV shopping, not because you were thinking, hey, let's get a recreational vehicle and go camping with the family on the weekend. You bought an RV out of pure necessity to have at your home, because if you didn't, you would be staying in a hotel room at a friend's house somewhere while you had to transit back to your home to work on your home. So again, guys, when you think of this video and you think of the RV he bought, it wasn't bought the way we normally think of going out and buying an RV, where you're watching, going RVing on TV and you're like, hey, that seems like a cool little hobby to get into or lifestyle. They bought theirs because their home was destroyed. They needed some means to stay close to their home, to work on it, to prevent looting, and to also have access to the things that were still available in the home. Like they have their refrigerator connected to power, so they could still have an actual residential
washer and
refrigerator.
dryer connected, you could still use the washer and dryer. The water still worked, so we still had, water for, I don't know if the water was working immediately after the storm, but we did have water, obviously, because the water was going to the camper, and that's how we were taking showers. And when I say that I started shopping for RVs, that shopping or research period lasted maybe 3 hours, because we were in a rush. We needed something very quickly. I was not about to be picky. I wasn't about to start looking at the fine details of, the amenities that come with it. We needed a roof. We needed a bathroom. We needed a shower. And that was the number one purpose of the RV. It definitely was not for going recreational camping of any sort. That was something that maybe would have come later. But after living in it full time for 7.5 months with 2 dogs, it was time to get back into a house and not look back at a camper for quite a while.
Well, and the whole memory of that camper was built around the fact that you needed it to live in. It wasn't about the fact that we have this beautiful home we're living in, we can rough it for a while in this camper and spend the weekend out at a national park or spend the weekend looking over this beautiful lake. None of that factored into it. That might have been something later down the road to say, once everything's back the way it was. But I think there was a lot of negative energy around this camper, right?
Yeah, I mean, the whole reason that we bought it is because our house was destroyed, so it definitely held a lot of, I wouldn't say, there were some good memories. We had Christmas in there, we had some birthdays, but it was more stressful memories than anything else.
Yep.
And if you think about it, someone that goes out and buys an RV for a recreational purpose, okay, they might use it a couple of weeks out of the year. I would say it would be average if you're a camping family. We were in this thing for 7.5 months. So compare that to someone that buys it for recreational camping. How long do you think they're going to own that camper to get 7.5 months of usage out of it? Probably a few years, I would imagine.
Yeah.
So while we were living in it full time, the interior was getting used every day, and I don't think those campers are meant to be used like that.
Well, not only was the KZ that you bought not full-time rated, it wasn't even 3 seasons rated or 4 seasons rated. It was your typical budget entry-level travel trailer
Yeah.
that a family who's just getting into RVing might get. And the reason why this specific one was chosen, again, availability, price, floor plan, and the fact that it fit the need that they had at that exact moment.
And it was a bumper pull that I felt didn't exceed the capacity of the Tundra.
Yep.
And so, that was a big deal because I watch my brother's channel and I know I don't want to exceed that because that just can cause problems. You've got your most valuable possessions with you, your family, your pets. You can't afford to take a risk because you want a bigger RV and it's like, oh, I've got a F-150. I want the biggest thing I can get. Or I've got a Tundra. I want the 32-foot, 11,000 pound. I don't want to have any issues. I don't want any surprises. And yeah, we went with the entry-level camper because that's exactly what we thought we needed. After we fixed up the house, I thought we may be back in the house in a few months. I didn't think it was going to be 7.5 months, but it was everything that we needed in a small space, and it served its purpose.
And did you sell it to a family member or you sold it to someone, but ultimately it's still probably functioning as a camper, right?
Yes, I sold it to a very nice gentleman that was retired, him and his wife. They wanted to travel. Not a family member. Now, I've never met the guy before, but he came over and looked at it, and he loved it. For him and his wife, I think it was perfect. They didn't have any kids. They didn't have any pets. And he had an F-250, so I knew that for him, it'd be an easy RV for him to pull. And I gave him a really good deal on it. You know, the Blue Book value on it was more than what I sold it for, but I looked at it like this RV allowed me to work on the house, to fix up our house in our property, so I didn't have to leave. Full-time RVing, and I compared the price of what it cost us comparing to what a hotel would have cost us or apartment would have cost us across town. And I said, I'm going to give this guy a great deal, a really, really good deal. And I did. I sold it to him for, I think, about $8,000 less than what I bought it for. And so if you think about that, I bought it brand new 8 months before, maybe 9 months before I sold it. And I gave him a really good deal because I felt like we got our money's worth out of it. It served its purpose, and it saved us money, and it saved me from having to drive across town, and it maybe saved our house from being looted.
So a couple things about the RV. Let's talk about it. So we already know the floor plan. There were a few issues with it, but I would say for the most part, it was probably in the condition that most RVs are on most RV dealership lots when you go and buy it. There was nothing, you never even got to see the RV. He purchased it sight unseen from an RV dealership over the phone and had it delivered like 18 hours later. That's how quick this purchase went through. He didn't get to go in and do a pre-delivery inspection. He didn't get to go in and walk around and say, where did that scratch come from? What was going on? It was delivered. He saw it there. KZ is definitely a vanilla brand, just like Coachmen, a lot of other brands. Very, very common brand. Volume unit. This isn't one of those like one-offs. And he got a unit, I think, if I remember correctly, the only major issue, you had two strange issues you brought to my attention. One was every time you would cook, it would get incredibly humid inside of the RV and you get water droplets until you found out that you need to open the vent behind your microwave.
Yes. Yeah, I didn't know about that. And so the vent wasn't open when we purchased it. But then I learned about that, along with many other things. The other issue that we had was a little bit of water. Whenever it rained, would come into the left rear corner of the camper. I'd find a little puddle of water down on the floor, and it didn't cause any issues because we dried it up immediately once we knew that it was coming in that area. And so I didn't know where to begin. I knew I had a leak and I couldn't take it somewhere to get it fixed. Especially not the dealership that I got it from. So what I ended up doing was just getting some regular silicone, and I applied the silicone to a couple of seams, and I think it was the window seam.
Was it that, or was it the? I think you had told me that the connection coming through the RV for your water or something, they forgot to put silicone around it.
That was another issue that I forgot about. That was in the bathroom under the sink.
Okay, yep.
Yep,
That's the one.
That's exactly right. Yep.
Yeah, they completely forgot to put sealant around the outside.
Yep, and I was able to get to that one pretty easily just by going under the sink, and then so I was able to just put more silicone there, which fixed that problem. And then at the back, when I put the silicone by the window seam, it fixed that problem as well. So the leaking issues were resolved pretty quickly. I feel like there's probably common issues that a lot of people deal with.
But overall, from the point you got the RV to the point you sold it, let's say, of course, it's brand new condition when you bought it. 7.5 months is a lot of usage on an RV for full-time living. That is for an RV that is not designed for full-time living. This is the definition of a recreational vehicle. It's to go out on the weekend and spend 3 or 4 days and then put it in storage for another 3 months and take it out again. How do you feel overall from the point you sold it, the RV, the condition it was in? How did you feel it lasted and held up?
I feel like for the time that we used it full-timing, it held up pretty well because I was aware of the construction of that, that it's not going to be the same quality as a home, obviously. And these things are thrown together pretty quick. And, I know that they're not the strongest. They don't take damage very well. And so I lectured my family every day. I said, be gentle with this. We've got to live in this for a while. We may have to sell it. And so, we kind of babied it. We took really good care of it. We didn't abuse it. We didn't, slam the cabinets and slam the drawers. But a couple of issues that we did find was some of the wood wasn't, I think it was maybe particle board.
Yeah.
And some of the screws would strip out real easy. The one place I remember, I think, had the most issues was the bed in the bedroom. When the storage underneath the bed, when you lifted it up, it had two hydraulic, had two shocks, and the resistance on those shocks was more than the wood could handle. So after lifting that up and down a few times, the whole hinge assembly and everything just cracked and broke. And there were some shelves that were under the bed on the sides that were connected to the same wood that was bracing those shocks. And so all of that broke and snapped in a couple of different places. So I ended up taking the shocks completely off, and I had to go back in and rebuild everything to make it functional, because otherwise it was just loose and wiggling around. So that was the one place that I remember, the wood failing. Those shocks were hydraulic shocks. They failed and caused some damage there. And I know exactly what it was. It's just the wood that they used wasn't that strong.
What about the cabinetry, drawers, stuff like that? How did all that stuff hold up?
It held up really well. It actually held up really well. We didn't have any issues with any of the drawers. We didn't have any issues with any of the cabinets. Didn't have any delamination issues. For the most part, everything held up pretty good. Even when I sold it, the gentleman that came and looked at it said it looked like it was still new. I know that I did have to buy one thing to kind of cover up all the nicks and scratches, and I found it on Amazon. It was a marker kit.
Okay, yeah,
brown
for furniture, yep.
And it came with like 6 different markers in various shades of brown. And I was able to go around the inside of the RV and just kind of touch up all the little spots that had little scratches here and there. Took me about 15 minutes, and then I was done.
But it held up okay?
Yeah, it held up good.
So, big disclaimer, and this is something that I know people are going to say, is, oftentimes an RV that's sitting static, it's not being pulled down the road, is going to hold up better than one that people take out camping. And I admit it. I think anybody would admit that if he took that RV camping for the equivalent of 7.5 months, where it was traveling down the highways, coming back, traveling, coming back, he probably would have had more cabinet-related issues. He probably would have had more suspension, tire-related issues, things associated to moving it around. And that's the difference oftentimes between folks who put an RV somewhere and keep it there as a static object where it's not moving versus towing it all over the country. And I could imagine you would have had far more issues with things had you had to hitch this thing up every single time and drag it down the road.
Yeah, definitely. The vibration of going down the road, on top of opening and closing everything all the time, I'm sure that it would have had more issues. But this once it was delivered to our house, it didn't move an inch.
Mm-hmm.
It stayed right where it was left, and it didn't move at all. And when the gentleman came to buy it, that's the second time it moved, is when he pulled it away.
You know, what it does kind of go to show you, though, is a lot of folks see RVs that sit on dealership lots for a long time, and it might be a year old or 2 years old because it just hadn't sold for whatever reason. And, you know, you're going, or maybe even COVID units where it was out there, and during COVID, all the units were selling, but now as COVID kind of died down a little bit, they have units that kind of stacked up on their lots that might be a year old. And a lot of folks are like, hey, if I go in and buy that unit, because it's been sitting there forever, is it going to be in really bad shape? And for the most part, if they don't move, they don't break. That's kind of a good way of saying, if you don't use something that moves in your RV, or if your RV's not being pulled down the road, things typically hold up reasonably well.
Mm-hmm.
So, but, you know, this video is getting pretty long. I think, you know, the overall point of this video was to kind of share the story that started off as kind of a tragedy. It morphed into an RV story, kind of talking about how they used the RV, how they lived in it, how it was something for them, and it had a lot of negative energy associated with it because of why they needed it. But then ultimately it sold, and the people who bought it bought an RV that was still in really good shape. And the other part of it is like my brother said, as things break, if you fix them, if you are semi-mechanically inclined, owning an RV and fixing things isn't very difficult. It's time consuming. You might have to put some effort into it, but you know what? Any home is the same way.
Definitely.
You know, people think
Definitely. You have maintenance.
Yeah, you have to do these things. They die if you don't.
Exactly. And you have normal maintenance and you have preventative maintenance. And your preventative maintenance is what you learn along the way. You know, especially when you have something that you really enjoy and you really love and you're passionate about it, you're going to research it even more.
Yep.
You know?
But guys, this has been a cool video. I love my brother. I absolutely appreciate him for sharing these stories. If you didn't check out the first video, go back and check it out because it does really talk about the hurricane in more depth and some of the struggles and challenges that area of Florida encountered just trying to deal with a Category 5 hurricane. And then, you know, this video was really talk about the RV itself. But love to know your thoughts. My brother's a fantastic speaker, even though he doesn't have a YouTube channel. I've been telling him he needs to because he is also an amazing angler. He loves to go out fishing. He loves to work on trucks. He loves to work on motorcycles. He has more motorcycling experience than anybody I know.
I don't ride motorcycles anymore. I have my daughter, and you know, I like to be alive as long as possible. I feel like I dodged a bullet. I made it through those years alive, and now I'm tinkering with my golf cart. I recently purchased the Yamaha golf cart, and I've been doing some work to it. I've got it going almost 40 miles an hour, and I think I need to turn it down a little bit. It's a little bit sketchy, but yeah, it's really fun. I love to tinker with things, just like my brother. I love working on stuff, and you know, I'm good with my hands, just like my brother is. And he says I'm a good speaker. That's pretty funny. He's definitely got it down better than me. But I hope I was able to give my story in a way that you can understand it, and that and you can see, you know, the effects of a hurricane and that it can have on a family, negatively and positively. I feel, you know,
Sure.
We're in a good spot now. You know, everything happens for a reason. You know, we wouldn't be where we are now without going through the things that we've had to go through. And we're very thankful. Thankful to be here with my brother and the families together for Thanksgiving. You know, right now that's what we're focusing on, is family and enjoying each other's time. And I'm really, really thankful to be shooting this content with my brother. I've told him that we need to do another video and maybe start doing a video, you know, start doing a channel of my own at some point.
Yep, I'm here to help. Anyways, guys, I sure hope you enjoyed this video. Again, this is a longer video. It's more of like a podcast type thing, right? Because it's, I mean, you're just looking at a fireplace, TV, and all this other stuff. You haven't really had a chance to see anything else, but hopefully the stories have been interesting. And, of course, shameless plug, eTrailer.com. I actually made coffee for my brother this morning, and he said it there. I was like, well, I got to face it at the camera. I mean, it only makes sense. Guys, if you haven't had a chance, please take a moment, subscribe to the channel, give me a thumbs up. We'll talk to you again very soon.